The bank statement trembled in my hands as I stared at the numbers, willing them to change. 3 years of careful saving for Lila's college fund, nearly gone. Only $5,000 remained where there should have been $85,000. I heard Damon's key in the front door and quickly folded the paper, shoving it into my pocket. My husband's footsteps echoed through our home, each one matching the thundering of my heart. "Hey, beautiful." He kissed my cheek, his briefcase landing on the kitchen counter with a thud. "Something smells amazing." I stirred the pasta sauce mechanically, buying time. "How was your meeting?" "Productive. Thompson finally signed that contract we've been chasing." Damon loosened his tie, reaching past me for a wine glass. "Where's Lila?" "SAT prep class. She won't be home until 7. I watched him pour the Cabernet, noting how steady his hands were. "Damon, I need to ask you something." He took a long sip. "What's up?" "I was organizing the tax documents today." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "The college fund." His shoulders tensed slightly, but his smile remained fixed. "What about it?" "Most of it's gone." The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. Damon set his glass down carefully. Too carefully. That. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I meant to talk to you about it. Mark needed help with his business, you remember Mark? He was in real trouble, Anya. I couldn't just. You took our daughter's future without asking me? It's temporary. He'll pay it back with interest by summer." Damon stepped closer, reaching for my hand. "Trust me on this." I pulled away, my back hitting the counter. Through the kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of our neighbor Sloane watering her roses. She looked up, meeting my gaze for a moment before quickly turning away. "Does Lila know?" I asked. "Of course not." Damon's voice hardened slightly. "And she doesn't need to. I've got this handled." The front door slammed, and Lila's voice rang out. "Mom? Dad? You won't believe what happened at practice today." Damon's eyes locked with mine, a silent warning passing between us. "We'll discuss this later," he whispered, before turning to greet our daughter with a perfect smile. Dinner that night felt like a performance, with all of us playing our assigned roles. Lila chatted about her SAT practice scores while pushing salmon around her plate. Damon nodded at appropriate intervals, his attention seemingly focused on his phone beneath the table. I watched them both, searching for cracks in our carefully maintained facade. "I think I could get into Stanford with these numbers," Lila said, her eyes bright with hope. "Mrs. Peterson says my essay draft is strong, and with my extracurriculars." Damon's fork clattered against his plate. "Stanford's expensive, sweetheart. Maybe we should consider some backup options." I gripped my water glass, so hard my knuckles whitened. "We've always told Lila to aim high." "Things change," he muttered, then forced a smile. "But we'll figure it out." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Lila jumped up to answer it, and I heard Ivy Archer's voice in the foyer. The girls had been inseparable since elementary school, but lately, something had shifted between them. "Mom, Ivy needs help with calc. We'll be in my room." As the girls headed upstairs, I noticed Ivy's sideways glance at Damon. He quickly looked down at his plate, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I should check on that investment situation," Damon said, standing abruptly. "Make some calls before it's too late on the East Coast." Through the dining room window, I watched him pace the backyard, phone pressed to his ear. A movement caught my eye, Sloane Archer, standing at her kitchen window, watching him too. When she noticed me, she quickly drew her curtains closed. I started clearing dishes, the clink of plates matching my racing thoughts. Upstairs, I heard not the usual laughter from Lila's room, but heated whispers. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, straining to hear. "You can't keep pretending." Ivy's voice drifted down. "Everyone's going to find out eventually. Just leave it alone," Lila snapped back. "You don't know anything." The back door opened, and Damon strode in, his face flushed. "Everything okay?" he asked, catching my expression. "You tell me," I replied, but he was already heading to his study, the door closing firmly behind him. I hadn't planned to confront Sloane, but seeing her watering her front garden that morning, something snapped. 20 years of neighborhood barbecues and shared carpools had earned me at least a conversation. Beautiful day, I called out, crossing our shared driveway. Her shoulders stiffened, but she kept watering the same patch of petunias, drowning them. Anya, she said, not turning around. I'm rather busy. Funny thing about being busy. I moved closer, forcing her to acknowledge me. Damon's been busy too, making lots of financial decisions lately. The water sprayer dropped, soaking her shoes. I don't know what you're talking about. $80,000, Sloan. That's what I'm talking about. Her face drained of color, but her voice remained steady. Whatever's going on between you and Damon is about Ivy, isn't it? The name hung in the air like smoke. Behind Sloan, I saw Ivy appear in their front window, her expression unreadable. She looked so much like Damon when she frowned. Mom? Lila's voice cut through the tension. She stood at our front door, car keys in hand. What's going on? Nothing, honey. Just chatting with Mrs. Archer. Ivy emerged from their house, stalking past us both. Let's go, Lila. We'll be late for practice. Actually, Sloan interrupted, her voice sharp. Ivy's not going today. We have an appointment. Since when? Ivy demanded. Since your father called this morning. The word father hit like a slap. Ivy's face crumpled for a moment before hardening into anger. She stormed back inside, slamming the door. Her father? I repeated, the pieces starting to align with sickening clarity. Sloan finally met my eyes, a challenge in her gaze. I think you should go home, Anya. Some questions are better left unasked. I watched Lila drive away alone, then turned back to my house where Damon's car sat in the garage. He'd called in sick today, something he never did. Now I knew why. The truth was right there, growing like a weed between our two houses, and I had been too blind to see it. I found the second bank statement wedged between junk mail. Another withdrawal, this time from our joint savings. $30,000, dated 3 days ago. My hands shook as I dialed the bank. Mrs. Whitaker, that transfer was authorized by your husband, the manager explained. It went to an account under the name Archer. The kitchen walls seemed to close in. I grabbed my keys, but Lila appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Mom, I need to tell you something. Not now, honey. I have to. It's about Ivy. Lila's voice cracked. And Dad. My keys clattered to the floor. What about them? I overheard Ivy fighting with her mom last night. About college money. She swallowed hard. About Dad being her father. The world tilted sideways. 17 years. The same age as Lila. All those summer barbecues, school plays, carpools. Watching my daughter grow up alongside her half-sister, without knowing. How long have you known? I figured it out last month, when Ivy started acting weird about Stanford. Lila wrapped her arms around herself. She said it wasn't fair that I got everything while she got nothing. That's when I started watching Dad more closely. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Through the glass, I saw Sloan. Mascara streaked down her face. Don't answer it, Lila whispered. But I was already moving. Sloan burst in before I could speak. He's leaving us, she sobbed. Damon's cutting us off. After everything. Get out of my house. My voice was ice. You don't understand. Ivy needs. What my daughter needs, I cut in, is her college fund back. Both of them, apparently. Sloan's face hardened. You think you're the only one he lied to? The only one he made promises to? Mom, Lila called from upstairs. Dad's car just pulled up. Sloan and I stared at each other, years of deception hanging between us. Then she straightened, wiping her eyes. Tell him, she said, this isn't over. I closed the door as Damon's key turned in the lock. No, this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Damon's laptop screen glowed in his dark study as I entered without knocking. He slammed it shut, but not before I caught a glimpse of flight confirmations. Planning a trip? My voice sounded foreign, hollow. Business meeting in Chicago. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Just for a few days. I placed the bank statements on his desk. And these? More business? You've been going through my things? His charm slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Funny how you're more concerned about privacy than explaining where our daughter's future went. I leaned forward, planting my hands on his desk. Or should I say daughters? The color drained from his face. Anya. 17 years, Damon. You watched them grow up together. You let them become friends while keeping the secret. He stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. I was trying to protect everyone. By stealing from Lila to pay off your guilt. It's complicated. His voice cracked. Sloane was struggling. Ivy needed. Don't. The word came out like a whip crack. Don't you dare act like this was nobility. You're running away, aren't you? Now that everything's falling apart. His silence was answer enough. Through the window, I saw Ivy standing in her driveway, staring up at the study. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. I've transferred everything back, Damon said quietly. Lila's college fund, our savings. It's not about the money anymore. I moved toward the door. It's about trust. Family. Things you clearly don't understand. Where are you going? I paused in the doorway. To talk to your daughter. Both of them. They deserve to hear the truth from someone who isn't afraid to tell it. You can't. Watch me. I turned back one last time. Oh, and Damon? Don't bother coming home from Chicago. I won't be here when you return. His protests followed me down the stairs, but I was already reaching for my phone, texting Lila and Ivy to meet me. Some truths hurt less when shared among those who've been betrayed. And we had all been betrayed enough. The coffee shop felt too small for this conversation, but it was neutral ground. Lila sat beside me, while Ivy perched across the table, her fingers wrapped tightly around an untouched latte. Neither girl would look at the other. Before I start, I said, pulling out the stack of bank statements, you should know your father isn't coming back from Chicago. He's running away? Ivy's laugh was bitter. Typical. He transferred the money back. I continued, spreading the papers across the table. Both college funds are secure now. Lila's hand shot out, grabbing one of the statements. Both college funds? That's right. I met Ivy's eyes. He's been maintaining 2 accounts. One for each daughter. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Then Sloane burst through the door, her face twisted with fury. How dare you? She grabbed Ivy's arm. I told you not to come. Let go. Ivy jerked away. I want to hear this. There's nothing to hear. Sloane turned to me. You had no right. They had every right to know. My voice carried across the cafe, drawing stares. You and Damon played with their lives for 17 years. Made them friends, neighbors, sisters, without ever telling them the truth. Mom, Lila's voice cracked. Did you know? All this time? No, honey. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I found out just like you did. Liar. Sloane spat the word. You knew something was going on. You just didn't want to see it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd ignored the signs, convinced myself Damon's late nights were about work, that his interest in Ivy's life was just neighborly concern. I'm leaving, Ivy announced suddenly. And I'm not going to whatever college he picked out. I'm done being his secret shame. Ivy, wait. But she was already gone, the bell above the door chiming her exit. Lila stood next, tears streaming down her face. I need some time. Don't follow me. I watched both girls disappear in opposite directions, leaving me alone with Sloane and 17 years of lies between us. In trying to fix everything, I'd managed to break the only thing that mattered, my daughter's trust. 3 days after the coffee shop disaster, Damon's key turned in the front door. I was waiting in his study, his laptop open before me, displaying emails that spanned 17 years of secret meetings and hidden payments. You're back early, I said without turning. His briefcase hit the floor. How did you get into my? Your password was Ivy's birthday. I spun to face him. Interesting choice. Anya, I can explain. Can you explain this? I held up a photo from his deleted files, him at Ivy's middle school graduation, standing just far enough away to look like another proud parent in the crowd. Or these? More photos scattered across his desk. Ivy's dance recitals, school plays. Moments he'd secretly documented while maintaining his perfect facade at home. Where's Lila? His eyes darted toward the hallway.
Gone.
She left this morning. I stood slowly, but not before finding something interesting in the attic. Want to guess what it was? Color drained from his face. The letters. Every single one. 17 years of correspondence with Sloane, planning how to keep your other family hidden, how to support them without anyone knowing. My laugh sounded hollow. Lila read them all. I never meant to get caught. Lila's voice cut through the room. She stepped out from behind the study door, clutching a stack of yellowed envelopes. Or to have two daughters who might actually want to know their father? Damon stumbled backward. Princess, please. Don't. Lila's voice cracked. Ivy's out there too, in your precious secret life. She deserves better than being your shameful mistake. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I demanded. Because from where we're standing, you built two separate lives and expected everyone else to pay the price for your cowardice. Lila stepped forward, dropping the letters at his feet. I called Stanford today. Told them I'm taking a gap year. She met his eyes. I'm going to get to know my sister. My real sister. Without your lies between us. She turned and walked out, leaving Damon staring at the scattered evidence of his fractured legacy. I followed her, pausing at the door. The divorce papers are on the kitchen table. Don't worry, I'm not asking for anything. You've given enough to all the wrong people already. 6 months later, I stood in our old driveway, watching the real estate agent hammer down the sold sign. Lila sat on the front steps, her gap year backpack stuffed with essentials for her upcoming trip. Ready? I asked. She nodded toward the house next door, where Ivy was emerging with her own packed bag. The girls had spent the past months piecing together their shared history, finding strength in their complicated connection. We're meeting Dad for coffee before we leave, Lila said quietly. Ivy's idea. I squeezed her shoulder. You don't have to. I know. But running away from truth runs in the family. I want to break that cycle. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daughter showing more courage than any of us adults had managed in 17 years. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Sloane appear on her porch as the girls loaded their bags into Ivy's car. Our eyes met briefly, a silent understanding passing between us. We'd both been wrong, but our daughters were determined to be right. Mom, Lila paused before getting into Ivy's car. Remember when you said everything happens for a reason? I nodded, thinking of the bank statement that had started it all. Maybe this was the reason. Not the lies or the betrayal, but this. She gestured between herself and Ivy. Finding each other. Really finding each other. Sometimes the truth hurts, I said, but secrets hurt more. That should be the title of your book, Ivy called out, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. I touched the manuscript in my bag, my story of family, betrayal, and redemption, written during sleepless nights when the weight of change felt heaviest. The advance copy was dedicated to both girls. As they drove away to meet Damon, I didn't feel the familiar twist of anger in my gut. Instead, there was something lighter, more hopeful. The truth hadn't just shattered our family's facade, it had created space for something new to grow from the wreckage. My phone buzzed with a text from my publisher. They wanted to fast-track the book's release. I smiled, thinking how sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another.